The clock reads 3:47 a.m. Moscow time. A detonation shakes the eastern border of Ukraine. Within seconds, satellite cameras capture a thermobaric explosion spreading over a recently established NATO military installation. For some analysts, it was a matter of time. For the entire world, the surprise is absolute. In less than 5 minutes, diplomatic lines collapse. Washington enters DEFCON 2. China declares red alert. Israel convenes its war cabinet. World War III has begun. It all starts with a single shot. But the real chaos unfolds in the first 24 hours. No one is prepared for what happens next. The initial reaction is swift but chaotic. Governments activate defense protocols. The United States mobilizes its Pacific and Atlantic fleets. Airspace closes over Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Stock markets fall 40% in 2 hours. In Tokyo, London, Frankfurt, and New York, stockbrokers abandon their posts. The global financial system enters paralysis. The dollar, euro, and yuan are frozen. Cryptocurrencies skyrocket but don't last long. Internet access is blocked by massive cyber intelligence attacks. The first major target isn't military. It's digital. Specialized Russian, Chinese, and North Korean groups execute simultaneous cyber attacks against electrical grids, airports, hospitals, and civilian databases. In California and Berlin, millions of people wake up without electricity or cell phone signals. In Tel Aviv and London, the GPS system stops working. Alert sirens begin sounding in Baltic cities, South Korea, Poland, and Taiwan. In less than 8 hours, NATO activates Article 5. The United States, Canada, France, Germany, Poland, and the United Kingdom mobilize troops. Russia responds with a coordinated ground advance toward the Baltic states. China imposes an air exclusion zone over the Taiwan Strait. Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz. Israel mobilizes 100% of its reservists. North Korea launches short-range ballistic missiles toward the Sea of Japan. Governments suspend all diplomatic activity with their enemies. Embassies close. International flights are canceled en masse. Ports are paralyzed. The world's major cities begin to collapse. Meanwhile, civilian populations panic. In New York, Paris, and Seoul, people empty supermarkets. Gas stations collapse. Highways fill with thousands of vehicles trying to flee cities for rural areas. There are crashes, riots, looting. Hospitals are overwhelmed. In Los Angeles and Rio de Janeiro, curfews are declared. In Warsaw, martial law is installed. In Istanbul, the military takes control of the streets. Each country activates its shelters. In the United States, the continuity of government system enters operation. Political leaders are moved to secret underground locations like Mount Weather and Raven Rock. In Russia, high command heads to the Yamantau bunker in the Urals. In Switzerland, civilian shelters begin filling by priority zones. The country had anticipated this for decades. There's food and water to cover 100% of the population for months. In Norway, mountain tunnels transform into nuclear shelters. In South Korea, subway shelters are occupied. In Japan, alarms sound in Okinawa and Tokyo. It's estimated there are only 10 to 15 minutes to seek shelter. But not everyone has that infrastructure. In Latin America, the news arrives with confusion. The governments of Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Argentina try to calm the population, but social media, before falling, had already unleashed panic. In Africa, countries with more foreign troop presence enter maximum alert. In South Africa and Nigeria, transportation services are cut. In India, the army mobilizes along its entire northern border. Pakistan activates its nuclear arsenal under maximum vigilance. While political elites take shelter underground, millions of people remain exposed. Civilian shelters, when they exist, cannot contain the entire population. Access lists prioritize medical, military, scientific personnel, and government officials. In Germany, entry is allowed for families with small children and pregnant women. In the United States, each state decides according to its own protocols, but many are guided by strategic utility criteria. Those who don't enter shelters improvise. They entrench themselves in basements, garages, sewers. Tents begin to populate parks and open areas. Scarcity quickly sets in. Drinking water supply is interrupted in several large cities. Pumping stations, dependent on electrical power, collapse. In California and Florida, potassium iodide pills are distributed due to fear of radiation exposure. In Berlin and Rome, authorities begin distributing survival kits. Bags of rice, cans of tuna, candles, matches. There's not enough for everyone. In the first 16 hours, the first massive bombardments begin. Russia launches cruise missiles on critical infrastructure in Poland and Latvia. The United States responds with airstrikes on Russian radar systems in Kaliningrad. Israel launches an air offensive on Iranian installations. North Korea intensifies launches. China conducts a partial invasion of Taiwan-controlled islands. The war is now global. It doesn't resemble any previous one. Urban areas become informational battlefields. Social media disappears completely. Access to Google, WhatsApp, Telegram, and X, formerly Twitter, is cut. Only some government emergency channels broadcast messages. Most people don't know what's really happening. Misinformation grows. Manipulated videos, fake audios, bomb rumors in every capital. Fear becomes uncontrollable. And while everything burns on the surface, nuclear submarines begin their silent dance. Those from the United States depart from the Pacific and Atlantic coasts. Russia's from the Barents Sea. China deploys units in the South China Sea. The powers seek to position themselves for a possible unthinkable scenario: nuclear exchange. By hour 20, the world is unrecognizable. The United Nations stands empty. The Security Council cannot meet. The Vatican calls for worldwide prayer and warns of humanity's longest night. Amid the collapse, small communities begin organizing on their own. Some local mayors make decisions without consulting central governments. In cities like Denver, Vancouver, and Santiago, Chile, citizens form networks of community aid and defense. Society begins to fracture. Finally, hour 24 marks an unsettling silence. It's not peace. It's the pause before the next blow. Humanity, in less than a day, has crossed a line that seemed impossible. The rules have changed. The balance has been broken. And the worst is yet to come. 7 days. That's the time that has passed since the world crossed the threshold. The conflict that began with a series of strategic attacks has expanded to every corner of the planet. There's no continent free from tension. Governments no longer speak of war. They speak of resistance, survival, containment. What was spontaneous chaos in the first 24 hours is now a global emergency system. Throughout the Northern Hemisphere, supply routes have collapsed. Trucks cannot circulate due to lack of fuel or fear of air attacks. Gas stations, already empty, are dispute zones. In many cities, cars have been abandoned. They transform into improvised barricades, family shelters, or looting platforms. Supermarkets have been dismantled. Not a single bottle of water remains. Bakeries baked their last batch of bread 5 days ago. Electrical systems fall one by one. Without maintenance, without personnel, networks begin to fail. In New York, Berlin, Moscow, Beijing, the darkness is total. Authorities decree rationing. Survival management begins. In Europe, governments order food to be centralized. Ration cards are distributed. In France, bread is distributed once a week. In Germany, shelters deliver canned food per family group. In the United States, FEMA establishes distribution centers in stadiums, gymnasiums, underground areas. But it's insufficient. In rural areas, the population begins planting immediately. Those who have seeds, water, and land have power. In Asia, the situation varies by country. In Japan, measures are strict. Strategic rice reserves are released, and underground shelters function with almost military discipline. South Korea imposes absolute curfews. In North Korea, media claim to have destroyed several enemy bases. while internally reinforcing total population control. China implements an extreme surveillance model. Drones monitor neighborhoods. Internal social networks are 100% controlled. Only government propaganda circulates. An emergency currency based on digital credits is created, linked to citizen behavior and collaboration. In the Middle East, conflict escalates rapidly. Iran and Saudi Arabia definitively break relations. Iraq becomes a battlefield for influence between powers. Israel launches a ground campaign on multiple fronts under the premise of preventive neutralization. Extremist groups take advantage of the power vacuum to advance. In Africa, many nations try to stay on the sidelines, but global economic collapse drags them in. In South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt, the army takes control of strategic resources. In the Sahel, armed groups regroup. UN humanitarian missions are suspended. In Latin America, the scenario is uneven. Mexico enters a state of exception. The government mobilizes the army to protect power plants, dams, and food warehouses. In Brazil, chaos is widespread. Crime skyrockets. In Colombia, the largest cities are militarized. In Argentina, a network of communal shelters is established, led by the provinces. The region is not a direct target of global attacks but suffers the economic, social, and health aftershock. Transportation is completely halted. The few flights crossing the sky are military or intelligence. Commercial companies have gone bankrupt. Merchant ships don't dock at any port. The oceans are dangerous zones. Sea mines, nuclear submarines, fleets in offensive position. On the military front, war is redefined. Conventional weapons continue to be used: tanks, missiles, drones, heavy artillery. But each day increases the fear of nuclear use. On the sixth night, a tactical warhead is detonated in an uninhabited area of the Iranian desert as a warning. The world interprets it as the first broken threshold. Nuclear submarines position themselves in triangulated formations. It's calculated that there are more than 200 nuclear warheads ready to be launched from the sea. Russia deploys units near the Atlantic coast of the United States. The United States does the same near the Barents Sea and the East China Sea. In communication networks, when they function, censorship is total. Governments only issue carefully crafted messages. Independent reporting is prohibited. Journalists are detained. Social media remains down or intervened. Information travels by word of mouth. Rumors replace facts. In some cities, the belief circulates that a massive nuclear exchange has already begun, even though it's false. Collective panic is as dangerous as bombs. Public health is in critical condition. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Without refrigeration, vaccines and antibiotics lose effectiveness. In some regions of Africa and Asia, cholera and malaria cases skyrocket. In Europe and America, essential medications for diabetes, hypertension, and epilepsy are exhausted. Thousands die without being counted. Mental illnesses skyrocket. Anxiety, paranoia, insomnia, and violence spread like another epidemic. In the most affected areas, suicides increase. In others, looting degenerates into murders, rapes, and lynchings. In some countries, especially in Northern Europe, parallel organizational structures begin to emerge. Groups of citizens unite to manage food, local defense, and communication. Shadow cities appear outside state control. Some cooperate. Others arm themselves. Fear of radiation begins to grow. Although there hasn't been a massive nuclear attack, the mere rumor of a leak at a power plant is enough to provoke exodus. In Ukraine, there are fears about Zaporizhia. In France, fear centers on its 56 nuclear reactors. In Korea, shelters are reinforced at any sign of radioactive clouds. At this point, the war is no longer just military. It's informational, psychological, biological, energetic, and global. And then, almost as if the world stopped, the word no one thought possible is heard: negotiation. A secret delegation of Swiss and Brazilian intermediaries manages to establish a channel between Washington and Moscow. It's not a ceasefire. It's an attempt to contain nuclear escalation. A strategic 48-hour pause in long-range attacks is agreed upon. Not everyone respects it, but it's the first indication that perhaps the worst can still be stopped. A month has passed since the day that changed everything. 30 days of bombing, blackouts, scarcity, fear, and destruction. What was once the modern, globalized, hyper-connected world now seems like a distant memory. There are no social networks, no commercial flights, no certainties. World War III has become a new order based on survival. Major cities no longer exist as we knew them. Many have been destroyed partially or completely by long-range missiles, air attacks, or internal disturbances. Some became uninhabitable due to fires, chemical spills, or radiation. Moscow, Warsaw, Seoul, Tel Aviv, Chicago, and Taipei are now shadows of themselves. Only charred concrete structures and constant smoke rise where there was once life. In rural areas, small communities emerge as resistance nuclei. Families, neighbors, farmers, former public employees, all organized to survive. Community gardens are planted. Improvised stoves are built. Wild animals are hunted. Generators run a few hours a day. Bartering returns. A liter of clean water is worth more than a mobile phone. Governments still operate but fragmented. Some direct from underground shelters, others from isolated military bases. Most have lost contact with many regions of their own country. Telecommunications continue falling one after another. In some places, only shortwave radio remains. In Eastern Europe and Asia, refugees number in the tens of millions. Entire families cross countries on foot, seeking less affected areas. Many die along the way. Hunger and cold are silent but constant enemies. In improvised camps, diseases begin spreading uncontrollably. Infections, diarrhea, pneumonia. Antibiotics are scarce. Doctors do what they can with what they have. In North America, the situation is critical. In cities like New York, Miami, and Houston, conflicts between civilians over food and fuel have transformed into local wars. In some areas, citizen control territories are created, led by ex-police, ex-military, or simply whoever has weapons and charisma. Martial law no longer means anything when the state cannot reach. In other regions, nature begins reclaiming what man left behind. Without humans to maintain them, wild animals expand. Wolf packs in Europe, pumas in South America, wild boars in Asia, bears in Canada. In rivers, fish return. In empty streets, weeds grow. Civilization retreats, and the planet breathes among the rubble. Meanwhile, underground, government shelters continue functioning, but not as planned. In many, food begins to run short. Water filters fail. Electrical systems overload. Overcrowding and tension generate conflicts. Riots are reported. In some bunkers, leaders lose control. In others, strict rules are established. Only those who obey survive. Global infrastructure collapses. Factories are closed. Supply chains broken. There are no spare parts, no chips, no plastics. No cars, cell phones, appliances, or medicines are produced. Every screw, every cable, every battery becomes a luxury good. Humanity returns to living with what it has, or with what it remembers how to build. In this scenario, new forms of power emerge. Local leaders, clandestine aid networks, independent doctors, armed humanitarian groups. In areas like Scandinavia or New Zealand, still relatively stable, reconstruction efforts begin to organize. They offer themselves as asylum zones. Few people manage to arrive. The world is isolated. And yet, amid chaos, there are signs. The communication channel between the United States and China has been partially restored. Russia and Turkey negotiate a humanitarian corridor. There's talk of a summit on neutral territory, perhaps Iceland or Greenland. Not to sign peace, but to avoid the definitive end. The conversations are secret, slow, tense. But they indicate that humanity hasn't completely given up. Because the first month of World War III has been devastating. But it has also revealed what we're capable of doing to survive. To protect. to rebuild. The war hasn't ended. Maybe it won't end for years. But if anything became clear, it's that the greatest enemy wasn't a bomb. It was the fragility of a system we thought eternal. And the forgetting that peace isn't a right. It's a choice. One that, if we survive, we'll have to make every day. If you enjoyed this video, please thank us by subscribing to the channel and tell us how you would live in case this conflict occurs. Also tell us, what should be the next video?